I asked Deanna Brown, who we brought on at Federated. She ran Scripps Network's properties, digital properties, Food Network and all. And Deanna spent most of her time, much like Joanne, she was at Yahoo and AOL, understanding the women's market. You're allowed to come out, Deanna, come on out. And so I asked her to put together a conversation about marketing in a social context to women. So welcome, Deanna.
Thank you, John.
So glad you're here.
Of course.
In so many ways.
I'm sure you are.
So Deanna's going to bring her panel on. Deanna Brown.
Panelists? You have to know, like, the behind the scenes of this is that Mr. Patel himself actually programs all the music, so I have to listen for the cues. So I want to set the context for this short conversation around what I think is a pretty meaty topic. If this panel, and I thought I was going to get slotted as a newcomer at 8:30 in the morning, the message would be wake up, because there's a big topic to talk about here, and it's a pretty important one. It happens to kind of envelop my career. I started, my first job in the business was at Family Circle magazine, and it was 1 in 3 women in this country read Family Circle magazine at the time. It was pretty phenomenal, pretty impactful. But so I'm going to set some context for this, and then I'm going to let our panelists kind of introduce themselves. I mean, if you think about it, 50+ million women do something online socially every week. 50 million plus every week. 50+% are on the social platforms that we know, and of those top 25 social platforms, Facebook being the largest, obviously, they're all dominated, with the exception of Dig, by women, right? So that, again, let's just put a point in that. 57% of Facebook is, in fact, skews women, and women attract 46% more activity per month, have 8% more friends, that's pretty obvious to me, and do about 62% of all the sharing on Facebook is actually by women. So again, just contextually speaking. And then we'll talk a little bit or dabble a little bit in mobile as the kind of the new ecosystem, new platform. But women are increasingly growing about 43% faster on the smart platforms than men. And again, we'll talk maybe a little bit about retail, about mobile, and about the uses of those devices. But to share in the conversation this morning, I want to introduce you some old friends and some new friends, people that I have done business with and or I find their insights interesting. So I'm going to start at the end and let them introduce themselves to you. Mary Gail.
I'm Mary Gail Pezzimenti. I'm the online director for LuckyMag.com, Lucky Magazine. But I also work on a lot of other new media projects, mobile, barcodes, new tech partnerships, Foursquare, et cetera.
I'm Erin. I head up the digital practice at OMD. Cover off all of our clients, but work primarily on clients like PepsiCo, Frito-Lay, Lowe's Home Improvement, and the like.
I'm Stacy Meckler. I've known Deanna a long time. I guess the fact that I'm sitting here gives me some credibility, so thank you, Deanna. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Euro, Worldwide PR, and we focus on anything from consumer packaged goods to pharmaceutical companies, and my role is really both organic and external growth and positioning the company as a leader in public relations, and on the social side and the traditional media side as well.
So just to kick this off, I mean, just to give you context of what I define as social is really an interesting kind of landscape that we all talk a lot about, but just to give it, again, specific reference to the conversation today, it's really about audiences having conversations with each other, audiences driving the conversations with each other, ultimately audiences publishing, if you will, around kind of what they consume. And there's all kinds of wonderful, exciting names for it, conversational media, user-generated content, prosumer content is what we used to refer to it at Scripps Networks. It's really consumers helping consumers kind of solve problems. I'm going to ask you folks, with that definition, talk to me a little bit about your impressions of the data itself speaks to the fact that there's a lot of women doing it. Tell me a story or tell me something in reference to your current work where you've seen women kind of engage in the digital platforms differently than men and how that works. Who wants to start?
Well, I can give you an example of something that we've done with Frito-Lay. We had a mini portfolio of brands that were the better-for-you snacks, and they were baked or 100-calorie packs, and they were designed with women in mind. And part of the challenge was that our shopper marketing group at Frito-Lay indicated that trips down the snack aisle, down the chip aisle, were decreasing. Women didn't even want to look at the chip aisle. They just wanted to bypass it, right, and go right for the crackers. So we needed to give them a reason to actually at least make the trip, if not pick up some of our products. So we developed a campaign, and there were social aspects to the campaign, but even the messaging and the strategy and the creative was very much informed by the way that women communicate with one another. And part of that was giving women permission and making them feel that it was okay to go down that chip aisle, that there were better and healthier options for them when they did ultimately go down that chip aisle. So we developed a Webisode Series, and the entire content play around that was giving women not only permission, but showing them that there's some self-recognition in that. So we created a Webisode series with 4 different characters, and each of those characters, sort of think of it as almost a Sex and the City kind of scenario, but each of those characters had different personality traits and different approaches to the way that they snacked, and but also interacted with their friends and family, and the way that they shopped and the way that they approach shopping. So it gave women an opportunity to recognize themselves in that content, and then also recognize their friends, so that they could say, hey, this is me, I behave this way too, and suddenly now I feel like I have permission to actually go down the snack aisle, and oh, by the way, that character seems like Deanna, and I'm going to send that over to her too. So it's just recognizing that women want to be, they want to be understood, and they want brands to understand where they're coming from and their perspective.
There have been so many examples at luckymag.com of, I'm really struck by how quickly sometimes there is response or engagement to something. We'll put up a post about some new miracle beauty cream, and 7,000 people will come in an hour to look at it. Or we'll put something up on Twitter, and the amount of retweets and the speed at which women are sharing things with their friends, and or we have an iPhone app where people are taking pictures of product and sending them to each other and communicating with each other about it. The speed and the sort of volume of sort of communication back and forth among women at times is, it's just really interesting and fascinating. And as a magazine publisher, the conversation has always been, in the past with print, obviously one way. And for us to see that two-way communication and what people are really responding to and how they're communicating with each other about it and what they're really interested in is just incredibly valuable to us.
Of course, when I introduce you and Conde Nast, of course, I probably should open the panel with what is everybody wearing, right? In the sense that that's how we talk about ourselves and how the media kind of captures us. I mean, with brands like Vogue and Lucky, there's obviously a lot of that sharing going on, primarily fashion and retail, but to take that one step further, are they sharing other, what I like to refer to as daily life stories? You've got the editors putting product out there and they're responding to it, but are there also,
Yeah, they absolutely are. I mean, there was one sort of very simple, basic thing on how to wear a white shirt in 5 different ways, and there were 1,500 people talking back and forth about, wearing a shirt a certain way, making themselves look better, feel better, certain deals or bargains, or just really, really helping each other out and forming these sort of mini communities around a certain topic where people have a common interest. And I'm, particularly with a brand like Lucky, it's very interesting, particularly this year, to see all of the, social media around commerce. I mean, people are buying something sort of in the moment, and they want, obviously, recommendations from the editors, but they want recommendations from each other, opinions from each other, from their friends. And I find a site like Groupon particularly interesting, where, if a group of friends actually buys something, the price goes down. So there are a lot of incentives out there right now for, encouraging communication and sharing, both personal stories, but also, hey, how can we sort of work together to get a better deal, or find out about something that, that they're interested sort of before anyone else has.
We may come back to social shopping. Talk to us, Stacy, a little bit about advocacy and women and how they engage socially.
I'm going to go the other end of the spectrum, although I'm very familiar with the social aspect and what to wear personally. But professionally, we did a campaign with Kofi Annan and Havas to garner visibility for global climate change with a big conference in Copenhagen a couple of years ago. And the number of responses from women who really, it was called Tick, 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 and the idea was the clock was ticking, as in tick-tock. And so the way they voted for the advocacy for global climate change was to tweet tick. And we had over 15 million tweets regarding, in this vote for global climate change, and a lot of them were women. And we were surprised because I think there's some areas where we expect it, and a lot of the stats that you shared make a lot of sense, but with things like that, with political advocacy and corporate social responsibility, we didn't necessarily expect to have the visibility that we did amongst women.
Do any of you have a sense for, when I joined the digital space in 1995 at Conde Nast, of all the portfolio of magazines, Mary Gail was there at the time, we chose to launch Bone App and Gourmet online first. And it was a startle to all the publishers that were currently online. They were mostly news and sports type publications. There were a lot of gaming and technology for what we'll call men's lifestyle stuff. And Conde Nast chose to zag when people were zigging. And it was based on one fundamental piece of research that we shepherded, which was this idea that women look at media and technology in particular as a tool to kind of handle their daily life. And men look at media or technology as a toy. And that, question to you guys, are you finding that is true? Is it more tools, solutions oriented, or are women having fun? Or do we see the difference in genders based on kind of the psychological behavior?
I think so. When I think of the way men sort of interact within the social space, a lot of that is focused around gaming and, fantasy sports is a social phenomenon in and of itself, but the focus is about the teams and trash talking probably, and the social aspect of that is almost incidental, whereas I think the way women approach it is that they're looking for tools and things to help them sort of navigate their lives, but it is literally catching up with friends and making sure that you're maintaining those connections. It's just a little bit more of a deliberate kind of approach instead of something that just happens to occur. It's a sort of a nice benefit, which I think is more the way sort of men approach it. Maybe it's sort of a secondary benefit.
Yeah, according to Forbes magazine, and a study that was done at Stanford, and then also an additional study that was done at Villanova University, in the last 6 months, they claim that women/girls are taught in childhood years to build relationships by sharing social information, where boys have a tendency to learn to compare and compete, always striving for more success, and so their activities supposedly, according to the study, represent that. And so I think we talk a lot in the media business around the chief household officer, and the fact that 80% of all purchase decisions related to kind of day-to-day, in some major industries, retail, consumer packaged goods, are made by that household officer. I think it's interesting that, again, the market really hasn't caught up with the fact that 80% of that dollar is happening there, where we're still seeing more like gender-neutral type marketing and advertising, and obviously it's being amplified on the social grid. Talk to us about. We've got two people who work on an agency capacity and one publisher for a second, but yet you're all kind of in the advice-giving business, day in and day out. What advice do you give your clients when their brand spanking new? They're just like, I don't have a social strategy, I don't know where to start. What is the advice that you start with in terms of how to engage?
I was just asked this question recently in an interview, so I'll answer first if you don't mind. I think it's kind of that look before you leap. There's so much misconception about what social media is, and people talk about it. Friends of mine ask me all the time, and I think it's does it make sense for your brand? And just because it may be the hottest buzzword right now in a communications vehicle, is it right for you? And don't just jump in, not knowing what you're jumping into, because there are a lot of opportunities. Obviously, marketing to women has been something that I think we've all done for a really long time. And it makes sense, and I'm sitting here as a woman telling you, about my broad perspective on it, and that I use social media tools both for applications as well as social. But going back to the question, really, just make sure that you're delivering your messages to the right audience with the right vehicle, and it may not be Facebook just because Facebook's the hot thing right now.
It's sometimes it's easy to underestimate some of the operational challenges in really embracing social. I mean, the conversation is perpetual. You can't simply start it and then the set it and forget it sort of model and hope that it just miraculously takes off. It's a lot of it's talent, putting the right talent in place, putting the right agency partners in place to make sure that campaign continues to move. So I mean, it can be daunting for clients. So I think the advice that we give is it doesn't hurt at all to listen, and in fact, it may be hurting you if you don't. So regardless of your activity in the social space, the listening aspect of it is critical for any marketer. And it's, if you're not listening to what people are saying about your brand and about the way you behave, you're missing out on a whole host of other things, not just embracing the social space.
And as a publisher, online, offline, we're used to putting stuff out there editorially and kind of deaf ears. We know best for the masses. How does that change a place like Conde Nast?
It's been a real evolution over the last couple of years, and many of us are finding, particularly lucky, but many of us are finding that, we cannot grow significantly without social media. It is a two-way conversation now. A lot of user-generated content is becoming our content. The interaction between the editor and the user or the reader is, become an important one. And in terms of engagement, that's sometimes when we see, the most activity. It's incredibly important. Your point about different, there's a lot of different social media platforms, but there are particular ones that might work better. Twitter is incredibly productive for the New Yorker and Vanity Fair, whereas for us, Facebook is more of a platform that we see. And print is, as we all know, having a tough time these days. And we see on certain social media platforms that certain platforms will convert to subscribers more than others. I mean, we really see both conversion, we're getting a lot of valuable information, we're able to adjust our content, on a dime and deliver, content that users are really sort of reacting to in the moment, and that's incredibly valuable for us. A lot of people don't realize, but in terms of magazine brands, the online audience and the print audience there's a very small overlap. There's usually about 15 to 20% overlap. So, it's really growing a new audience and growing the brand. And one thing that's particularly exciting for me is a platform like Foursquare, because that platform allows us, we were one of the first brands to sort of partner with them, and we put a 650 store directory on the platform. And that means that our content will go out to users sort of in the moment when they're somewhere shopping or they're in a particular neighborhood. It's those 650 small pieces of content can be delivered to them in a moment. And that is a very different dynamic than, the print magazine delivers, even Facebook, even Twitter. That location-based connection that the brand can make with the store and the user is, an exciting development.
Erin, talk a little bit about, now that we're kind of in mobile in the retail space, talk to me a little bit about Lowe's, one of your big retail customers. Has that changed? Is the mobile platform changed? Is the social on mobile changed? Mm-hmm. People are obviously shopping very differently. Mm-hmm. What's your client think about that?
Yeah, we had almost an anecdotal story from a couple of our retail clients who said that, before a typical Saturday shopping day was, going to Lowe's, hitting Target, if you have time, and just making sure that you went there in person and you experienced all the your shopping in person. And now not only are we really pressed for time, we don't want to pay put in a whole tank of gas and drive around town all day long. We want to make one stop. We've got a lot of other stuff to do, and if I can do some pre-shopping, if I can do some comparison shopping online before then, I'm saving time, I'm saving money. I don't have to go to the gas station twice on a Saturday. So we had that sort of anecdotal kind of information, and how can we help that sort of comparison shopping scenario, and that really plays out in a really interesting way on the mobile platform too, because you're going to maybe one or two stores. Is this going to help me decide what my next store is today? Am I going to be able to find a better deal, even another product that may be down the aisle a little bit farther? So it's really just helping and enabling consumers to get the most out of that shopping experience. I think what Target has done in the last 2 months with enabling the automatic scans in all of their stores is fantastic. And I think that you're going to start to see a lot more retailers really pick up on this and understand the power that this can bring to consumers as a much more personal way of interacting with them.
Let's back up and let's continue on the thread around some of these newer technologies. Are there, Mary Gail, you mentioned Foursquare and location and bar scanning and things of that nature. Are there other new products or things that you're finding out there that are particularly resonating with women? I mean, obviously, Facebook and Twitter have proven themselves out to be both conversational, but also particularly relevant to getting information and kind of sourcing solutions, if you will. Are there other things that you're seeing or you're playing with or experimenting with?
I mean, a lot of what we're doing this year is really revolving around e-commerce. We launched an e-commerce platform in Lucky Mag this year within sort of an editorial space, and we are starting to include social media. So again, people can communicate about product, but there are a lot of really interesting startups, out there, newer companies that are. There's a newer company called Open Sky that has a universal shopping cart, and you can embed a widget in a blog post so that someone could be reading a blog with multiple brands and check out, in one shopping cart. I mean, Lucky is sort of moving toward, Lucky's actually 10 years old this year, and 10 years ago it was a very new concept in magazines, and where we're moving to now on our 10-year anniversary is, we want to be shopping 3.0, and you made the point about, a lot of women are looking for things to save time, and there are just some really interesting technologies out there like Groupon, like Open Sky, like Foursquare, that really are huge time savers, money savers, and also are allowing conversation among women in the moment. And that seems to be very desirable, and we get a lot of feedback through all of our social media platforms that that's what women are interested in.
Erin, any new hot things you've noticed or have discovered? Or do you want to let us know here? Help us discover?
Yeah, I mean, I think the mobile technologies are particularly important. I think what we're very mindful of is the rates of adoption of those different kinds of platforms. So want to certainly explore everything that's on the new and on the horizon, but really make sure that we are pushing some of the time-tested of 2.5 years social platforms like a Facebook, like a Twitter, to make sure that we are maximizing it for the kind of scale. I mean, there's certainly an argument to have a very sort of passionate, sort of small group of women who are using a particular platform or a particular technology, but for many of our clients who are big blue chip clients, it's really important to get the scale associated with that. And I think that's something that we're trying to concentrate even more on, is understanding how social can really achieve a level of scale so that it's not just kind of the cool new thing that 5 people are doing, but the cool, amazing thing that's changing the way that women and people interact with brands.
Speaking of changing, what's interesting about the panels, we've got kind of a group of people that all represent different sides of the communications kind of spectrum. We've got an editorial/publisher on the end. We've got a traditional, we'll call an advertising agency. Well, OMD has got a lot of hands and feet and all kinds of things. And then we've got what I'll call, at least initially, a traditional public relations or communications agency. Roles have changed, right? Brands are publishers. Editorial people are advertisers, marketers. PR folks are doing outreach, but are dabbling in marketing, communications, and commerce in different ways. What's the general sense? Are we confused, or are our worlds just changing so rapidly that we're adapting? Do you want to start?
I don't think we're confused. As long as I've been in PR, I think a lot of people think we're just go to parties and pitch media, but I swear there's more to it. I think PR has evolved a lot. I've been in this business for 16 years. I've been on the client side at Estee Lauder, and I've been on the agency side. And the really good agencies I've worked with and the really good brands I've worked with are all about taking a real macro strategic vision at communication. And I think the social media platform I think it's fair game for anybody. I think if you've got the expertise, if you've got the right approach, if you've got the knowledge, I think it's open season, it's fair game.
I would agree with that. I mean, a lot of people just think we buy media and go to parties, and that's not the truth. I think it's still an emerging area, and you have to have the right skill set to suggest that the person who had been media planning and buying before then is the right person to suddenly adopt a Twitter handle on behalf of a client, I think is a little short-sighted. So we do need people with different kinds of backgrounds. We need people who are copywriters, we need PR people, we need media people. So I think that we're just flexible to the different kinds of talent that should be managing social campaigns out there. I think where the media agencies really, I think we have a great opportunity to bring a level of accountability to social, and that's in providing a much more rigorous framework for social analytics. It's been a little frustrating, I think, in the past couple of years that we got so excited about social media and what, having a number of fans or how many likes you had on Facebook or how many, retweets you got today. That doesn't mean anything. It's just the simple reporting of that data is absolutely meaningless without context. So I think, I think you're going to start to see a lot of the media agencies really emerge in terms of understanding the meaning behind the simple reporting of, the number of tweets you got this week.
And to build on that, where I think PR, it's always been a hard time because our clients always say, well, where's the ink? And that's how we're measured. And PR is a lot bigger than that. So this also gives us an opportunity. And again, it just sort of proves the synergy that it provides us with some guidelines for ROI that we can feed back to our clients.
And let me guess, Mary Gail, you write stories and go to parties.
Oh, yeah. About shopping, but maybe not parties. No, I mean, magazines aren't magazines anymore. They are content brands, and everyone has had to adjust. But that's really, and we want to be on as many platforms as possible, and in as many places as possible. I mean, if Lucky is succeeding, any woman who wants to shop in a store, online, or anywhere would come to Lucky first for breaks, deals, and giveaways, and the latest information. And if we are successful, that's what we're doing. I've been really excited to, just among the editorial staff and on the publishing side, all of these people with different talents have emerged. We found people who are incredible videographers or great bloggers, or our editor-in-chief she's loving to tweet. So I think that people's skill sets are changing, and I think people are discovering, sort of new talents and really embracing the fact. I mean, it's an exciting time. Yeah. We're really able to create new platforms, work with new media, and also I think we have a closer relationship with, the retailers in our pages, on Facebook, on Twitter. We're partnering with them in interesting ways, whether it's a Facebook pop-up shop, a Twitter giveaway, doing things on a virtual boutique crawl on Foursquare. It feels like a time of regeneration.
I'm almost out of time, but I wanted to open it up to see if there were a couple of questions or any questions from the audience. We've got some mic runners.
Hi. I wanted to just touch base. No one spoke about spending power and how conversational media has affected that. As we all know, women, spend a lot of money, and I'm just curious if anybody has any case studies or specific examples of how social has actually proven some sort of ROI for a particular brand or company that you've worked with.
I can answer for the Frito-Lay example for the Only in a Woman's World campaign. So there were two objectives for that campaign. One is to get women to actually go down the chip aisle, and the other was to actually move product off the shelves. And that achieved both of them. So I think it sort of reframed the way that we thought about marketing to women in the future, is that we need to make it much more conversational, because that sort of approach had a much greater impact than anything that was just simply, here's a product, please go buy it. So it was much more of a, an interactive sort of scenario rather than a simple sort of persuasion campaign. And so I think that was a big learning for us, because the results associated with that, I think we increased trips down the aisle by 14%, which, when you're talking about the opportunity to sell to someone is huge. And sales over that same period of time, I believe, I don't want to misspeak here, but increased somewhere around 12%. So pretty significant for a brand new product, a brand new portfolio of products.
Hi, I'm Christine Levy. I'm a social media consultant, and I just have a question. There's so much buzz about reaching out to mommy bloggers and how they're such a big demographic and you have to target them. And I noticed none of you mentioned mommy bloggers at all and is reaching out to them. And so I'm just wondering if from your standpoint, it is a track that we need to be aware of and we need to be targeting, or if you think Facebook is a much better demographic, like screw the mommy bloggers, we don't need them, So what do you think about that?
It depends on why a woman is coming, how they are interacting with your brand. When a woman's interacting with our brand, it's as a shopper, not as a mommy. So I think it's absolutely a demographic. We were blogging on Cafe Mom and had a relationship with them, but it depends on how they're identifying themselves with your brand and what they're interested in at the time.
But I think there's definitely great significance as influencers, especially in the consumer products, consumer packaged goods area. Obviously, being shoppers, being primary purchasers, I think that makes a lot of sense. And when I was the former head of communications at Clinique, and obviously that was a demographic as we tried to go younger, an established brand really trying to hit a younger market, the mommy bloggers were highly influential for us.
It really is. I mean, we didn't get to the whole parenting or even the dating social space, but that is probably dominates the bulk of Federated Media's women's targeted media is around moms. And it is one of those big spending categories that ultimately plays. It's probably the area where it's torso and long tail and a lot of social journaling and experiences. Juice.com is one of our properties, and it's really about Heather's perspective on life, and she's our web celeb and one of our leads, and it is about that very personal approach to parenting, but also to her life. And so to Mary Gail's point, it's, am I in the mode of being a parent? Am I in the mode of being an individual, or am I in the mode of being a sister or a friend or what have you? You'll see these women who are moms touch different media types as different kind of roles that they play. So it's kind of the different faces. Other questions?
Lisa Hanauer at OMG. Just wanted to ask, eMarketer actually just came out with an article today that talked about how the concept of taking advice, how it actually plays in the social landscape versus sitting around in a mommy, setting, just, sort of conversating among one another. What is sort of your perspective on how marketers can approach that landscape versus a social friend, for example, and how do you think women are using them both together and also separately in terms of expressing or learning or researching, et cetera?
Brands taking advice from moms.
I'd say, having worked in the beauty category richly and deeply in the last several years, it's a huge opportunity for us because of the influence and the peer-to-peer significance in beauty and the referrals. At Clinique, we were very careful how we approached the bloggers several years ago. We were very careful in identifying ones that made sense, that were credible by our guidelines, and then listening to what they said and really formulating products and product lines around the needs of whether it be the teenager or the older, established Clinique brand ambassador. So it was absolutely, and probably still is very much a strong force in the marketing communication strategy.
Okay, I think, is there going to be a hook, John? What's the prototype here? Did the music start? What happens here? We stand up and we start dancing.